everyone, and welcome back again to the 80s Movie Den. So, for this episode, I just wanted to talk about my favorite sitcom of all time. Um, Sometimes that changes depending on my mood or what time of year it is, believe it or not. But pound for pound, as they say in the boxing world, I would have to say that my favorite sitcom of all time, for a variety of reasons, we'll get into some of them in this episode, is Three's Company. I watched it with my dad when I was really young. A lot of the stuff I didn't understand, a lot of the sexual innuendo and a lot of the jokes, they went right over my head. Obviously, I was a young child. But as I started to get older and continued watching it in syndication, I started to understand the jokes, and that show became even that much more funny to me. What I didn't understand, as far as the dialogue, it more than made up for itself with all the physical comedy, the slapstick humor. As a kid, that's funny. Watching John Ritter's character, Jack Tripper, get into some of the shenanigans that he got into. That guy was an athlete. When you look back and you see some of the stuff that he did, he was quite acrobatic, very agile, very athletic. There were no stunt people doing that stuff. That was him. That was him going headfirst into a door, flipping off a couch, doing front somersaults. The scene with the hammock, that was one of the first episodes where he really displayed his physical abilities, where he was trying to get onto the hammock and was having no success whatsoever. That scene was hilarious. Unreal, some of the stuff that he did. And, sad that we lost him so young at 54 years old. But he was an unbelievable actor and extremely funny, charismatic, and he really carried that show. But that's not to say that the supporting cast did not hold their own, because they did. That show, I'm just going to veer off a little bit. That show, when you look at some of the episodes now, do they hold up? If I was being honest with you, I would say no. Some of those episodes don't hold up. Some of the jokes, the misunderstandings, they don't hold up. Keep in mind, that show started in 1977 and ran until 1984. Some of the scenes, some of the storylines, you could call them cheesy, but in many ways that show was ahead of its time. It really was challenging social boundaries at the time, with the gay male roommate living with the two girls. Some of the jokes centered around that. They were hip, they were young, they were pushing boundaries, pushing limits. So in many ways, it was quite ahead of its time. It was quite progressive. But yeah, looking back, some of the humor, it's wouldn't be considered funny by today's standards, but to me, it's always going to be hilarious, because for its time, it was amazing. So going back to the supporting cast, you had Mr. Roper and Mrs. Roper. Mr. Roper was played by Norman Fell. Audra Lindley played Mrs. Roper. He was, that miserable, old-fashioned, landlord. He was always concerned about money. But he was so funny. He was absolutely hilarious. Norman Fell and John Ritter worked so well off of each other. The jokes that Mr. Roper would make towards Jack about his, what he would call his condition. My goodness. but just so funny. The way Mr. Roper would break the fourth wall when he would make a joke. You know, he would make some nasty comment or remark towards his wife and then look at the camera, and just an explosion of laughter from the studio audience and people at home, of course. But you know, Audra Lindley's character, Helen, she held her own, and she was quite funny. I got a kick out of listening to her. She was the sex-starved wife. In some ways, you felt sorry for her, because Mr. Roper paid no attention to her at all, gave her no love whatsoever or attention. And she dealt with it by making her own nasty jokes and remarks towards her husband. The two of them were amazing together. The chemistry they had was something else. The roommates, you know, Janet Wood, played by Joyce DeWitt, and Chrissy Snow, played by Suzanne Summers. Two amazing characters. Chrissy, the, you know, dim-witted blonde, who would often surprise her roommates by doing things that were actually quite smart and intelligent. But she was hilarious. Some of the facial expressions that she made, you know, she was absolutely hilarious, and a beautiful woman as well. You know, rest in peace, Suzanne Summers. We recently lost her as well. And Janet Wood, played by Joyce DeWitt. Janet was amazing. Janet was Jack's counterpart. The two of them, you know, they started the show from the very first episode and went right to the end together. And she was a great character. You know, again, another beautiful roommate. Absolutely hilarious. You know, as the show progressed, she became more of a almost like a nagging wife in a way, to Jack, you know, in some ways. You know, but she loved him. She was always looking out for him. She'd often get disappointed with him, because of some of the, you know, some of the things that he would do. But she was a great character as well, and no shortage of slapstick humor from Joyce DeWitt, physical comedy from her as well. If you look back at some of those episodes, some of the somersaults and the flips and the hanging upside downs and all the stuff that she was doing was pretty phenomenal as well, as well as Chrissy. Of course, Jack's best friend, Larry Dallas, one of the classic sitcom names of all time, Larry Dallas, the used car salesman who lived upstairs, the womanizer, and Jack's best friend, played by Richard Klein. Phenomenal supporting character. I found him to be absolutely hilarious. Some of the scenes he was in, some of the storylines that centered around him were absolutely phenomenal. Just so funny. You know, greedy Gretchen, you know, is always dating all these, you know, he's got a, you know, a date with the twins, and he's got this going on and that going on, and you know, he was always roping Jack in all the time, and absolutely hilarious. Richard Klein. And then later on, when Chrissy left, or when Suzanne Summers left the show, and Chrissy Snow's cousin, Cindy, came in, played by Jenny Lee Harrison, she was phenomenal as well. Another physical comedian. Apparently she was a former Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, if I'm not mistaken, before she got into acting. Beautiful lady, beautiful young lady. I'd have to say she was my least favorite of all the female characters in the show. She was a little bit too much for me. Some of it, even back then, was a little bit too much, a little bit too exaggerated. They made her even more clumsy than Chrissy, which I didn't think was possible. But yeah, she did an amazing job in that role. And then, of course, Terry, played by Priscilla Barnes. gorgeous, hilarious. I'd have to say she's a close second for me behind Janet. The reason why I choose Janet is because she was the original. But Terry did an amazing job. I think she came in season 6, 7, 8, I believe she did, the last 3. And she was awesome. She added a lot of spunk to the show. You know, she gave it that little boost that it needed. And she was, you know, aside from Janet, obviously, and Suzanne Summers, she was one of the mainstays on the show. Yeah, just incredible. And of course, Mr. Furley. You know, you can't forget Mr. Furley, played by Don Knotts. He was a great fill-in too when the Ropers left. The Ropers left to go do their own show, and unfortunately that didn't pan out probably the way they wanted it to. If the Ropers would have stayed all the way through to the end of the series, I'm sure it would have been just fine. But talk about one heck of a replacement in Don Knotts. You know, the girl, the lady chaser, you know, the macho, you know, Mr. Furley, you know, thought he was a ladies' man, was nothing of the kind. Great apartment. You know, you would expect a bachelor like Mr. Furley to have an apartment to look the way his apartment looked. But he was absolutely hilarious as well. He he just blended right in. From the first episode that he started on, he was phenomenal. The whole cast was hilarious. They all had something very important to contribute to that show. You know, unfortunately, the last season I feel was rushed, especially the last few episodes. I think it was rushed a little bit, unfortunately. It would have been nice if they would have, you know, dragged that out a little bit longer and let those storylines play out a bit more. I know many of you watching this have seen the show. You may not have seen all of it, so I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, I think I've covered all the characters. You know, of course, John Ritter, unbelievable. I have the series. I actually have the entire set here. I bought these when they first came out. I believe it was the early 2000s when they were released. So this is season 1, and yeah, it's just a simple case. And then season 2 here, I believe there's about 6 discs or something like that. So season 2, of course, those 3 musketeers there. And then we have season 3, and we've got Larry and the Ropers for season 3. And then we have season 4. Yes, I forgot Lana. Lana was in the show for a little bit as well. I don't know what her actual name is. I'm sorry, but Anne Wedgeworth. That's it. Obsessed with Jack. Lana was obsessed with Jack. She was in the show for a little bit. Didn't do anything for me really, but you know. So yeah, so that's season 4, and then we have season 5. Funny enough, Chrissy really wasn't in a lot of these episodes anymore. There were a lot of episodes where it was filmed. She wasn't really on set. It was filmed with her making phone calls from back home. She was taking care of her ailing mom or dad, I can't remember exactly. And so she'd have little snippets, little scenes here and there where, you know, near the end of an episode, you know, Jack would be on the phone talking to her, and there would be like a split screen, you know, and then, you know, other episodes where Janet was talking to her, and then they kind of just slowly phased her out. Season 6, we've got Cindy and Terry, Larry and Mr. Furley. And then, you know, we start to wind down here. We got season 7. And then season 8. So yeah, so this is the first sitcom I ever purchased. Was the Three's Company, and I don't even know if I had much money then, or but I didn't care. If I had $20 left in my bank account, and one of these series were $20, I would have spent my last 20 on it. That's how much I love this show. And there was no way I wasn't going to have all 8 seasons. And I watch them every year. I usually watch them once a year, and I just zip through them, and they're absolutely hilarious. I come home from work, I throw a disc in, and I just sit back and I laugh. Sit back with a snack, watch and laugh. Absolutely, just love this show. Again, the nostalgia of the show, watching it when I was young, watching it in my childhood home, watching it with my parents, my father in particular, who was a huge fan of the show. So those are other reasons why I love it so much. But if you haven't seen the show, or if you've only seen a few episodes, do yourself a favor. Give it some time, give it a chance. It may not affect you the same way it affects me, because I watched so much of it as a youngster, and so I've got that attachment to it from my childhood. But I can still watch every single episode, even today, and laugh out loud. And that last episode is, that's a killer, that one. That's hard. That's a tough episode to watch. But I think that's why I go back and start over and always watch them. But yeah, so that's my Three's Company, going on 17 minutes here. Yeah, amazing show. If you're still with me, I appreciate you sticking around. This went longer than I thought it was going to go. I could probably keep going, talking more about it. I'm sure I missed a few things here and there. But yeah, that's my favorite sitcom of all time, Three's Company. I just wanted to dedicate an episode to Three's Company. I feel it deserves that. And yeah, thanks again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe it'll inspire you to go back out and watch Three's Company again, or give it a shot if you've never seen it before. Stay tuned. I've got more episodes coming. Episode every Saturday, the odd Sunday. Keep an eye out for my shorts every Friday. This has been the 80s Movie Den, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.